In this video, I will cover the history and the fate of the USS Penguin. The Penguin was a Lapwing-class minesweeper. This class of vessel was the U.S. Navy's first dedicated minesweeper. Its creation represented an important step in the development of U.S. naval forces, as it allowed America to gain experience with the requirements and functions of a minesweeper. However, the Lapwing entered service towards basically the end of World War I, so didn't really see much experience as a minesweeper after 1919, and was quickly made kind of redundant. The Lapwing was quite cumbersome and hard to maneuver when compared to later American minesweepers like the Raven class. That is not to say that the Lapwing class was a failure, as they saw extensive use by the Allied powers in the immediate aftermath of the First World War, clearing sea mines. The USS Penguin was laid down on the 12th of November 1917 at Elizabethport, New Jersey. The New Jersey Dry Dock and Transportation Company carried out the construction of the vessel. The Penguin was launched on the 12th of June 1918 and was sponsored by Miss Lillian Ray, who was the daughter of James Ray, who was a foreman ironworker at the shipyard. The displacement of the Penguin was around 950 tons, and it had a length of 57.25 meters, a beam of 10.82, and a draft of 3.15 meters. Speed of around 14 knots, which was slow but kind of standard for the other minesweepers at the time. Very slow compared to the Raven class, but obviously that is a good few years in the future. Crew complement around 78, though some sources go as high as 90. It depends on the time period we are talking about. For armaments, it had 3 3-inch guns, propulsion, 2 steam boilers, and then 1 vertical triple expansion steam engine, and then 1 shaft. The Penguin was commissioned into the US Navy in November 1918. By this point, the fighting in Europe was over. For the first few months of her service, she operated in the waters around New York. Then in May 1919, she was sent to the North Sea to assist the British in dismantling the North Sea mine barrage. This was not a German minefield, it was actually an Allied minefield, but now that there was peace, it needed to be dismantled so that commerce could flow unimpeded, and so that there were no accidents that could be blamed on the Americans or British. This task was not without risk, and the Penguin was damaged twice by mine explosions. The first incident occurred on the 9th of July when a mine exploded in the vessel's kite. The damage was only minor. The second incident in August occurred while the Penguin was laying buoys. The damage from this mine explosion was more severe compared to the first incident, and a good number of the crew suffered serious injuries as a result. Temporary repairs were done to restore her to working conditions. After this, she was sent to Chatham for more extensive repairs before sailing back to America. The Penguin returned to New York in November, and she was soon transferred to the Pacific and attached to the Pacific Fleet's Mine Squadron 4. In June 1922, the U.S. Navy decided to decommission the Penguin, and the vessel was placed in reserve at Pearl Harbor. This did not mark the end of her service life, as in the following year, the Penguin was recommissioned into the U.S. Navy. However, she was no longer to fulfill her original role as a minesweeper. Instead, the Navy turned the vessel into a gunboat for service on the Yangtze River. During this period of time, the Penguin operated from Shanghai and was assigned to the Asiatic Fleet and remained on China Station until the end of the decade. After this point, the Penguin was sent to Guam and performed a variety of roles for the administration of Guam, such as patrol and rescue missions in the newly established Trans-Pacific air routes. On the 15th of January 1940, the Penguin rescued the crew of the Japanese fishing schooner Saiho Maru and returned them to the Japanese freighter Saipan Maru on the 21st of January. Now, funny enough, they were originally supposed to be returned to the island of Saipan, but the Japanese government were very anxious about this, as obviously they really did not want U.S. troops or U.S. military forces to be able to see what was happening on the island, what fortifications the Japanese had been doing. So instead, they had to be given over to a freighter instead. Whilst researching the Penguin, I came across a newspaper story that detailed the disappearance of the Hawaii Clipper. This was a Martin M130 that went missing on the 28th of July 1938 in the Pacific Ocean. Now, the reason I bring the story up is because the Penguin was one of the many naval ships involved in the search and rescue effort for the Hawaii Clipper. Sadly, the Hawaii Clipper and its 15 occupants were never found. By the late 1930s, the political climate in Asia was heating up. In response, the Penguin was sent on more patrols and took on a more defensive posture. Despite these measures, America was attacked by the Japanese Empire on the 7th of December 1941. The Penguin had just returned to Agana Harbor on the morning of the 8th to the news that America was now in a state of war against the Japanese Empire. Soon thereafter, Japanese planes began to appear and began to strafe and bomb the U.S. forces on the island. The Penguin slipped her mooring and moved outside the harbour to gain manoeuvring space. And during this time, the Penguin's anti-aircraft guns are, of course, firing at the incoming Japanese planes, and they actually managed to down one Japanese plane. This, of course, made her a prime target for Japanese bombers. Though no direct hits were scored, a group of bombs did straddle the ship, which resulted in massive damage and killed one sailor and injured over 60 other crew members. The Penguin was then maneuvered a mile and a half off the beach in waters around 370 meters deep and was scuttled to prevent her capture by the Japanese. The crew of the Penguin then joined the other American forces defending the island. However, the Japanese were able to shatter this defense by the 10th of December, and the island was taken. According to Mansell, the pre-war crew of the U.S. Penguin was roughly 65 men. 6 of these men were killed by the Japanese on the beach after the Penguin was scuttled. Mansell states that they were executed, while other sources simply state that they were killed and then mutilated by the Japanese. I'll only bring this up to show that there's some kind of like disagreement on what happened exactly during the Battle of Guam. Regardless, though, the sources do agree that 6 sailors from the Penguin were killed by the Japanese on the beach. Some of the Penguin's crew were able to avoid capture for a time, such as Clarence Bruce Johnston and Michael L. Krump. Krump was eventually captured by the Japanese in September 1942 and was beheaded on the 11th of September 1942. Johnston was captured by the Japanese forces on Guam in October 1942 and was executed on the 22nd of October. It is incredible that they were able to evade capture for so long, and it is tragic that they were killed in such a brutal way when they should have been taken as prisoners of war, but were not. The rest of the crew of the Penguin became POWs of the Japanese Empire. This was not good, as obviously, as the Japanese treated POWs horribly, somehow worse than the Nazis treated Western Allied POWs. Once the crew of the Penguin reached Japan, they were distributed to camps across the island chain, such as Umada Bonsho and Zetsu Shide. Apologies if I have butchered that pronunciation. The condition in these camps were poor, with limited bathing and toilet facilities. The guards would also beat prisoners regularly, and food was often limited in the camps. Only one crew member died whilst in a POW camp. This was Robert McLean Brown from South Dakota, who tragically died of pneumonia whilst at the Umado POW camp, and that's spelled Umeda. He died in February 1944. It is amazing that only one crew member died whilst in captivity, when you consider that the death rate in Japanese internment camps was 27%, which is, I believe it's a good 3 times higher than the German camps. Whilst researching this vessel, I came across the story of Olin Summer and his cousin Gordon King. King had only met his cousin once. This was in 1928, and King was only 4 years old and Olin was 20, but obviously left an impression on King. But Olin was a sailor in the US Navy and was actually on the Penguin when the Japanese attacked the island. We already know what happened to the Penguin, so there's no need to go back over it. But Olin, along with the other survivors of the Penguin, were captured by the Japanese, and Olin spent the rest of the war as a POW. Despite the horrible conditions, Olin survived the war, which is remarkable, considering he had become a POW on the second day of the Pacific War. Olin sadly passed away in 1970. His cousin in the early 2000s started a campaign to get Olin the Purple Heart. The military for a while kind of stonewalled him, but eventually they did kind of give in and relent, and in June 2006, a naval officer presented Olin Summers Lake's Purple Heart to King. So I want to end the video on a somewhat happy story, but obviously, there's a lot of tragedy there in this video. So that basically concludes the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learnt something from it, maybe. I have attached my sources in the video description, and I have also listed the names of the crew of the Penguin in the video description as well, along with the commanding officers of the Penguin. I just couldn't find the right point to add them in this video. So yeah, thank you for watching, and yeah.